Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've had a good lunch and you are energized and not sleepy. All right, so we have the next session, which is on cybersecurity for space operations. This will be a 40-minute session, and we'll have another one in the same track after this. The chair for the session is Mr. Rajiv Chetwani, Chief Information Security Officer, DOS, ISRO, Director, DISM, ISRO. Sir, can I please request you to join us on the stage? The moderator for our session is Col KV Kuber, ENY. Sir, can I please request you to join us on the stage? Our speakers are Mr. Narendra Nath, Joint Secretary, National Security Council, Secretariat, Government of India. Mr. Saikrishna BVS, CEO, Saptang Labs Pvt Ltd. Mr. Singh from PwC India. Lieutenant Colonel Amandeep Singh, Spatial Domain Expert and Author. And Mr. Suhas Gopinath, CEO, Global Zinc. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here for the session. Strong cybersecurity is vital to protect critical infrastructure, networks, and satellite systems. Collaboration among space agencies, industry stakeholders, and cybersecurity experts is crucial to devise and implement effective strategies for space operations, ensuring the future of space exploration and satellite technology. We've been discussing space and satellites a lot in the last 2 days, and cyber security is definitely a crucial aspect of it. I would request Colonel Kuber to please take it over from here and start the session. Do you need a mic there, sir?
Okay. There's a mic over there. Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. I think we're going to discuss a subject today which is, to my mind, not tested and tried. And I'm not aware of a satellite already being hacked. And I'm not aware of the repercussions that have been there post-hacking. I'm really not aware of whether a satellite can be hacked. I'm not even aware whether, post 5G and 6G, when we are going to have a lot of security protocols in place, whether there can be an intruder into a particular network. I'm not aware of all this. But what I'm aware of is that the future of the outer space is rapidly changing. And the change is only visible by protecting the real estate in space. So we have started talking about protection of the real estate in space, and therefore there are going to be some vulnerabilities. My colleagues are going to talk about it. And a study of the military history and an involvement with space warfare programs would like to give you an indication that I do not know what will be the doctrines and rules or the philosophy under which such a warfare in the outer space will be carried out. So there are large distances, difficulty in tracking, difficulty in assessment. Few countries possess worldwide space surveillance assets actually, and therefore a continuously maneuvering moving object and how they are going to protect that, and even those who possess the space sensor systems, I must say that it's a very difficult task, and about 95% of the space attacks, it's predicted, would be completed within 24 hours. And generally, if we see the type of response that anyone would give, there is an assessment which says the first response comes after 7 days. And therefore, are we talking about a predictable attack and therefore I'm going to predict it and be safe, or I'm going to wait for the attack to happen and I'm going to take action? We have got rapid reaction teams and things like that, and any number of them are there, CERT and things like that are there. So there are new technologies. I want somebody to talk about the cyber sovereignty, and we've been talking a lot about data sovereignty, and I think it's time for us to talk a little bit about cyber sovereignty and technological dependencies, and how do we achieve this type of a sovereignty in the battlefield, and cyber resilience capabilities. So that's what we are going to talk. I think we will give a little bit of a flavor to quantum technology, and how quantum technology, how does it actually interface with cybersecurity, and what can it do or what it cannot do. So the only thing I know is DEFCON, which is organized in the US, and DEFCON, which is there. The US is already, there is another huge HackerSat program that's coming up. I think it's happening in August. And here, 8 hacker teams from US, Australia, Italy, Poland, Germany, who are the pre-qualifiers. After the pre-qualification round and all that, they have now emerged, and where about 380 teams got registered. And if all goes according to the plan, the hackers will compete in Las Vegas in August. So they're called the white hat guys, the ethical guys, and then we will come to know what is really vulnerable and what is not vulnerable, and how somebody can do that. And the satellite that the hackers are targeting is called a Moonlighter, and is designed to be vulnerable to hacker attacks. In fact, the US has actually produced a vulnerable satellite for them to have that. It's size of a toaster, and several security features. It's not equipped with its own engines, and the controllers will also be able to reboot. So what I will do is, with this type of thing, that I would request our chairman, Mr. Rajiv sir, would you like to give the layout, the contours of cyber security in space, and then I want to shift purely to a military perspective of the whole thing. So all yours.
Good afternoon to all of you. The tone is already set by Colonel Kuber about the requirement of cyber security in space sector, but I'll just elaborate on it and then set the ball rolling for discussions with panelists. So as all of you are aware that space sector has opened up. It has opened up in a big way. Many companies have started operations in India. Many startups have come up, whether it is satellite manufacturing, whether it is space application or it is launch vehicles. Some Indian companies' satellites are already launched. A suborbital test of a launch vehicle is done by one of the startups from Sriharikota. InSpace was formed for authorization, regulation, promotion of space in India. And as government has already announced, the FDI policy is on the anvil. Shortly, that also will be announced, and there will be more activities in this area. So space assets, as we all know, play a pivotal role in nation's economy, and they hold strategic importance. And that's why they are prone and susceptible to cyber attacks with unpredictable consequences. Now, this commercialization of low Earth orbit, all of you are aware of how Starlinks is setting up internet using their satellites, which are predominantly low Earth satellites, OneWeb and many other companies. So this commercialization of low Earth orbit has resulted in enormous interest by both government sector and private sector in space. And today the space systems are becoming more and more sophisticated, more complex, because there is onboard processing, there is more of onboard processing happening, which is again paving way for more vulnerabilities and more possibilities of cyber attacks. New threats to space assets are created by this increased interconnect between the space and the cyberspace. What we will be talking about air-gapped networks, the myth about air-gapped networks and things like that. But today there is more interconnect happening between the space and the cyberspace. And this is also leading to more vulnerabilities, more possibilities of attack. The gray zone operations, as we call, are targeting space assets. They are difficult to detect. These operations can be carried out with less risk by the attacker and very difficult to detect, and they are almost anonymously possible to do. Now, space sectors is unique in the sense that it supports civilian sector, commercial sector and military sector. And this has thrown open new challenges, unique challenges to the cyber security experts. Hence, it is imperative to safeguard against these cyber vulnerabilities because the society and the critical sector relies heavily on space assets, the space sector. So with this background, I would request Colonel Kuber to initiate the panel discussion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That's the great background that's been given. So you know what? The business rules of the Government of India do define as to who should protect the country and who should do certain things. Like for example, the business rules or the rules lay down that it will be the Ministry of Defence which takes care of the external threat and to an extent also internal disorders. When it comes to space, I really don't know as to who should actually protect it. Will there be a multitude? Who's got that single point responsibility? I'm not aware. But then, what I want you to understand today is a military perspective. What does the military think about this entire game of cyberspace in space? Cyber in space and cyber security in space. And for that, you got no better than Colonel Amandeep Singh, who is a domain expert. He's got more than a decade of experience only in the military angle to the whole thing, and therefore you will be enriched by his presence. May I remind you, sir?
Thank you, sir.
You got about 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Colonel Kuber. With the time I have been allotted, I'll try and make an attempt to contribute for knowledge enhancement of each one of us. Space as a sector and satellites, as we all know, play a very, very critical role in communications on Earth and as an integral part of communication networks and the systems. As our reliance on the space and the satellites are increasing and growing manifold, the concepts of communication, security, intelligence and commerce have also exponentially grown. Space cyber threats are an underestimated political threats for which countries are looking into counter space capabilities that include electronic methods. Compared to any anti-satellite capability, an interference with a satellite through a cyber operation or a cyber attack per se can be conducted in a way which is far way cheaper, faster and very, very difficult to trace back. As Chair has brought out this point, the importance, the connect of the cyber operations with the space operations, the subject and the topic today gains more relevance. With the sophisticated knowledge of the satellites and the data distribution networks what we have, and the data acquisition, data processing, data dissemination, and the intelligence thereon, or all subjects of the space verticals, upstream, downstream, all are vulnerable for the cyber attacks. Rather than focusing on the physical attack, this dimension of cyber attack on space and satellites have to be given more emphasis. The startups, the new technology, the industry has to dwell and understand this subject first and thereafter be more focused on this subject. The computational complexity of the satellites is growing. In initial times, we have seen the series what we got of the space assets, the data what they gave us, the way they gave us, and now we have reached up to nano satellites, cube satellites, and the constellation of satellites. So all these, the complex computational increased capabilities over a period of time in terms of technology further gives a great opening for cyber attacks. As a military man, we have to safeguard our space assets. We have to integrate and collaborate with the industry, in addition to ISRO and other space agencies, to safeguard these assets. Ladies and gentlemen, this point needs to be understood. This is the final frontier of the warfare. And as a satellite, I take that as a weapon for me. If my weapon is not safe, then my nation, as a nation, I am vulnerable. With this, I'll request the panel experts to enhance all of us on the subject of further detailed verticals of cyber operations. That's also.
Thank you, Amandeep, for that. In fact, from the since you have heard the military viewpoint, and I'm going to ask you a question around that. You can just keep thinking. When you say, as a military man, I want to protect, what do you have to protect the space? What wherewithal does the military have to protect the space? That I think you can just keep thinking about it. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to do is to get you onto the real meat of the thing. And okay, before I get to Mr. Narendra Nath, in fact, I wanted to call him, but then I thought before I call him, we should discuss certain vulnerabilities. What are the real vulnerabilities in space? And for that, I think I would like to call Suhas. Suhas, would you like to talk about the vulnerabilities and
Basically, I come from a cyber offensive background, and I've been a believer that everything that is connected, it is vulnerable. But with regarding to the space or satellites itself, I think the biggest threat or the flying bombs that we have, as we call, is actually those legacy satellites, which are extremely vulnerable because, of course, when they were built, when they were designed. Unfortunately or fortunately, cybersecurity was not so advanced, or the APT groups were not so advanced. And of course, as mentioned by Sir, also by the Chair, was that with the advent of quantum computing coming in and with the intervention of 5G, I'm also very sure that it's always a cat and mouse game. And in terms of the vulnerabilities specifically with regards to satellites, I think the legacy satellites have got the lack of authentication right now. At least some of the satellites that we've seen, or at least some of the APT groups have seen, and unencrypted communication which exists. And the most importantly is satellites are extremely vulnerable for DOS attacks. Of course, while in my experience, you may not be able to interfere with the incoming traffic or outgoing, but at least if somebody wants to launch a denial of service on a satellite, it's possible. And one example with one of the satellites, it's called as beta navigation satellites. They have used or certain hacking groups. It was also spoken in this year's World Economic Forum that if a beta navigation satellite system was hacked, where you could, if a navigation satellite system is hacked, obviously it can impact the maritime navigation or across the ground navigation itself. So, I feel more than the satellites itself, I think the ground stations which are controlling the satellites are even more vulnerable in case if a hacking group actually takes over a control of the ground station and is able to send wrong signals or is able to send corrupted signals to the satellites, then it's as good as you've taken over the control of the satellite, and you can either intercept or you could steer the satellite for collision as well. And we've also seen some of for recent vulnerabilities where of course sensor tampering is happening on satellites, and the most importantly the supply chain attacks. I think as a policy as well, in case if there's a mechanism for all the strategic installations, especially the space security, in case if we want to enhance, and of course in general for space, cyber security itself, it's extremely important maybe to have a stronger policy to prevent supply chain attacks. I mean, if there are OEMs who are colluded with the hacking groups and if they intentionally have left certain backdoors and of course the intent is for the hacking groups to hack their satellites, it can be extremely vulnerable. Yeah. So, thank you.
So, Mr. Narendra, in fact, I thought I should call you now at this time. But while I call you in, I wanted to, Suhas says it was not advanced and there were a lot of vulnerabilities. And then I'm reading some report which says that, India is, I think, 10th in the global cybersecurity index. And therefore, we are very poor in terms of legal measures that we have taken, and the technical measures have been good, but the legal measures have not been so good. Overall score, we got about 90.49, and we have advanced something like 37 positions. We're fourth in the Asia Pacific area, demonstrating dedication to cybersecurity. China and Pakistan, our neighbors, are far behind us. China was ranked 39 and Pakistan is 79, 33 and 79. And therefore, it all demonstrates something. When Suhas says that it is not advanced and it is so vulnerable, then why has not an attack happened till now and why we are not aware about it? And what steps should we take to ensure cybersecurity in space should there be a threat? Sir, the mic, you want to come here? Yeah. So, the Joint Secretary at the National Security Council Secretariat.
I'll put some points. Thank you. We've been talking cybersecurity in all forums, and how is cybersecurity in the space different? I think that's what, and then we can decide that, is there something different we should do here than what we are doing in other sectors. There were certain points that were brought out in the presentations made earlier. One is that the space sector has been opened up, and there are a lot more players who have come in. And I bring a corollary here with another forum where we are talking about security issues that are coming up, and that is the open radio access networks. There also there is some talk about getting open radio access networks and specific challenges that are coming in there. So one of the things that's recognized, and in both the cases, is that when bigger organizations were coming up with solutions and designing products, we expected that because of the maturity of the organization, the size of the organization, the practices in the organization will be good, so that there would be secure by design that would happen in the organization, and you expect secure products to come out from that, bigger companies and all of that. So the thing that we found when the Open RAN part was that when we have multiple small players coming with software pieces, and then how do you ensure that they follow secure by design principles? Do they have robust practices in place? Do they have the manpower in place for all of that? Do they have a security practice in place in their organizations? And that is one security challenge that is there. In the space sector also, this is what would happen, that when we have all these smaller players coming in and who are actually out there for their survival, that they should get the product out fast so that they can make money out of that product. I don't think they would be putting their thoughts together to see how do I secure and make a secure by design product. And that is one challenge I think the space sector is going to face. That how do I enforce, if let's say secure by design is something that we all talk about, that how do I enforce secure by design in all those enterprises? Do I have a mechanism or a template or some guidelines that I will prescribe within the space sector, and which I'll apply across all the organizations? Say, so these are the guidelines for secure by design, and you have to certify your organization as per this. And then only the products come out of this certified organizations would be the ones that I will take in, and then put it into the satellite or the launch vehicle or on the onboard sensors and onboard applications that are there. So that is one part I think is unique with the space sector as in the current format that it is there. The other issue that I find is different from in the space sector is that the Earth station part of it. we have multiple Earth stations that might be required in such certain applications. And those multiple Earth stations need not necessarily be in our own country. They could be in other countries. You could, for the especially with the tracking part of it and for the monitoring of the spacecraft and all of that. And what is the sort of control we have on those other places if those Earth stations are being used for either monitoring the health of the satellite or controlling the satellite, or also getting the data out to the satellite. So what is the sort of control you have over all those, and how do I protect those assets is one other thing, the unique challenge that would be there. Because in many other aspects, you could have multiple your own cyber assets within the country, and we would be having control over that and visibility into what's happening in those. But that is another unique challenge I find that is in the search. I think these are two things that we would require to address. Other than that, if you look at the space sector, it's IT infrastructure, which is there, a lot of IT infrastructure. And the standards that are there for the securing of IT infrastructure, whether in terms of how you design and implement it, the type of audits that are supposed to be done. So there are some standards available, and they would be equally applicable here. Coming to the audit part of it, see, from our office, we have created a special audit team for some critical infrastructure. And then they've been extensively trained. We've sent the team across. A special recruitment has happened. Team has been trained at CMU. They've been trained in Singapore also, and they've been trained in India also. They've got SANS training. All of that has been done, and they do audits. But then they're very good at IT audit. And recently we told them that go ahead and do some audit for the power sector, where you have some OT infrastructure. Now they don't have the expertise. They don't have the domain knowledge for that. We also asked them to go and do audits for telecom sector. They don't have domain knowledge for that, because the protocols that are there are unique to that particular sector, and unless they have domain knowledge in addition to the security knowledge, they would not be able to do a proper audit of that place. And that's equally applicable in the space sector. There are many protocols that are unique to the space sector. So when you talk of any auditor, so what is required in this sector specifically is you have to develop auditors who have domain knowledge in the space sector for them to be able to do, in addition to normal IT knowledge that is required and IT audit processes that are required, they would require to have domain knowledge of the space sector if the proper cybersecurity audit is required to be done. So that is another area of work that is required to be undertaken in the space sector. There are other aspects, if you allow me to continue. Like,
We've got 10 minutes.
Okay. The other aspect is, one, I think you mentioned about the supply chain. You mentioned the supply chain. Yeah, supply chain is a very important part of it. And in supply chain, when we talk of cybersecurity, we talk of two dimensions of cybersecurity. One is the standards part of it. Cybersecurity standards would be there. And then whether you implement your product or the services or the processes as per those standards. The standard process are available. So how robust is your product with respect to the design and architecting of the product for cybersecurity reasons? That is one part of it. That you could verify by prescribing the standards for all the equipment that goes into it, and seeing that, having a certification mechanism to see whether it complies to those standards. That's one part of it. And for that, again, specifically the space sector has to decide what are the standards they would like to apply for those products, and then have a certification mechanism for that. But that itself is not sufficient, because there is another part called the intent. Because an organization may be able to produce products that comply to your standards, but if the intent is not good, they could put some malware which will be very difficult to detect. So when you talk of a supply chain, in addition to the processes that company should have within the company for manufacturing the products, and also the type of quality that they build into the products and the standards that are applicable, we also should be very savvy about the intent of that particular source. And that is where we talk of the trusted source and trusted products that we have started applying from our office, especially in the telecom sector. and the trusted vendor system that is also going to come in the power sector. So here you have to evaluate those companies with the previous history of that company, the type of ownership it has got, who are the shareholders, who are the board of directors, who are there, where is it located, where does the manufacturing of the products happen, where do they source the components from, which are the companies which give those components. So this is another aspect of it. So especially in the space sector where, when the space asset goes into the air and it's very difficult to do anything after that, it's very important that we actually look at both the dimensions of the security part of it. That the standards, you freeze the standards and have your products as per the standards. And are you also very keen about from where the product is coming from. And they are not mutually exclusive. They both have to happen together. Because I could have a trusted source in all respects, but if the poor design is one thing that they give you, it's not good enough. So it has to be robust from the design perspective and also robust from the intent perspective, and both have to be addressed from the supply chain perspective, especially in the state assets. I think with these few words, I will conclude now, and we can take up in the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Narendra, for that. When you say the space sector has to decide on certifications, on design, and it has to be this and it has...
Buy off the shelf, install and start working, or let's make our own system. Buy off the shelf is straightforward, just buy, but then you end up paying for rest of Aadhaar life, which is going to be 400 years as of now, what has been predicted for next 400 years. Aadhaar, those 12-digit number which has been shown to you will not exhaust for next 400 years. And keep paying for the licenses and the hardwares and everything to the various companies. There was no choice. Or you create your own system. Satellite system, which I understand here. I'm not a satellite man to start with, but I am a cyber and an IT expert. Satellite system is, from that point of view, is a nascent stage in the sense where the aim was launch the satellite, make it work. This was there, this concept was there, as was brought out by Sir a few minutes ago, was 20 years ago when we were developing softwares, the aim was to create the software, let it work. That was most important. Security baad mein dekhenge. I assume that was the aim. I'm sure I was part of it, so I know how the softwares were made at that time. And that's what Colonel brought out here, that there are few, and he also brought out, there are few satellites which are there launched, and nothing as far as security is concerned is built in. What do we do about it? And sir also said, how do we know whether they are being hacked or not? So there's a very famous saying, there are only two kinds of person in India, or in the world. One who have been already hacked, and the other one who are going to be hacked. Okay, so there are only two kinds of person. You may not even know that you've been already hacked. Okay, so those which if they're not being hacked, they're already probably hacked, or if they're not, it is just a matter of time, sir. Now, so how do we do it? So what Aadhaar did and what we must do it here was set up working committees. Military wants unko matlab nahi, unko chahiye, they want a system. I want a satellite communication system launched by me and should be secure. That is the ask, because their job starts after that. Who certifies it, as brought out by sir? Who certified it, on what basis? Who's to bring out those set of rules for certification? And then there are a lot of players who are making the software or hardware for the satellite. How do we ensure? We cannot produce everything else. We have to depend on countries, which in certain cases are adversaries also. We have to depend on them. We have to buy it. There's no choice. हम आज बनाने लग जाएंगे अपनी गाड़ी. We cannot produce Mercedes in the next 5 years. When we start, we'll only make four wheels and something to drive. That is all we can make. We'll take another 20 years to make equivalent of a Mercedes. Similar thing, when we start hardware, our hardware is in a nascent stage, semiconductor is on a very nascent stage, we have to depend. Now when we have to depend, how do we install? So what we normally do is we buy the hardware, build the security layers over it, and start using it. That's how everybody does it. That's how we have to do it even here. At the end of it, it is going to be those routers and those systems and CPUs and the routers and various infrastructure which are going to be there. That is on the ground. And when it comes to the satellite, we have to ensure how do we build so-called those firewalls and the IPS and the IDS systems into the system, depending on the form factor and the capability of the load of the software. How do we do that? Shall we buy off the shelf or we go for open source? What Aadhaar did in that particular case was buying off the shelf was very expensive. Creating a new one would have taken donkey's years. So start using open source. When you start using open source, one advantage of using open source is it has been already tested by a lot of people. It has already been tested by a lot of people. Generally, it is assumed to be less vulnerable because it has been already tested. Buy something from a particular company, the company certifies it, we don't know how good or bad it is. And believe me, they may give you the source code. कि हमने बना लिया है, ये आप चेक कर लीजिए. हमारे पास capability नहीं होती है source code actually to go through the entire thing because we don't even know eventually what has been burnt inside the system. He has given the source code where what has been burned inside and does the vulnerability exist? We don't have that this thing. So start using open source, built in, use those encryption technologies which are open source. Use them. That is what Aadhaar did. Use the open source technologies. Use open source encryption systems and build over it and just move forward. And then at the back end, set up the industries to produce something equivalent. And government need to give assurance to the industry that you produce a product when we'll buy it. Today, unfortunately, the government says you make a product, if it is good, we'll see. If it is good, we will see. That's a very risky business. How do you know it is good? And is it good enough? Because every product has got a development life cycle and a maturity life cycle. Till that time, if you don't buy it, how do I sustain? This is the problem current industry faces. So we have no choice, import and give, that's what is going on. So when you say I want to create my own routers or I want to create my own firewalls and all, this has been going on for all 20, 25, 30 years. We have been producing or trying to produce. All oldies would definitely know that this kind of things have been going on, at MOD level, at CARE, at ISRO level, at DRDO level, at what places we have been trying. But not been able to do it. So go open source, build it over and wind it up. How much time do I have, sir? We finished? Yeah. Okay. And once that is done, of course, as sir brought it out, certification, somebody to certify, and an ecosystem to develop. Ecosystem basically means who's going to operate it, who's going to update it, who's going to monitor it, who's going to check them. That ecosystem requires youngsters to come out from the universities. Today, university means computer science, BTech computer science. He only knows operating system, compiler, Python, and all these languages. Nobody teaches them about security products and how to manage it. One-odd courses will be there in the BTech or MTech. One-odd course will be there. We require a large manpower to handle this thing. That is not there. So academy has to be brought in. They have to set up systems there so that you say, okay, this fellow is trained on satellite communication and satellite security. Unfortunately, today, if I need this person, you won't get anybody in the market. You have person who knows a particular vertical. That's all. With that, I'll quickly. This is the food for thought. We have to think about it, and I'll conclude with this. Thank you.
Thank you. So with this, actually, we are coming to the end of this, but I believe there are another 3-4 minutes. I just wanted the audience to participate in this. Therefore, I want to open. But before that, I want to give a couple of points. We talk big things in many conferences. Big conferences, we talk big things. We say this should be done and that should be done, and this is how an industry is not good or government is very good. I don't know what all we say. But I can tell you one thing. If you continue to follow the system of L1, you will get only L1 stuff. The earlier the government realizes this, the better for the government. Better for the nation. Forget about the government. Because the government is temporary. Nation is permanent. If you are really looking at the interest of the nation, if you are talking about cyber threat, if you are saying that, you're waiting to be hacked, and you say, I'll still go for L1, God help us. So that is one point that I wanted to bring out. The second point is accountability. Colonel Amandeep said, we will protect. I asked him if there is a wherewithal. I don't know. I want to leave it open yet because I don't want to get into those details. And the Joint Secretary from the NSCS told us, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. If we are still in the space of we have to do, and if the space sector has to yet determine, and Group Captain Devesh brought out a very interesting point. And, when he said in the implementation phase, how it is to be done, are we not in a position today to embed it? Or you are only going to create layers after layers after layers? I'll throw something out. First of all, I'll throw something into the space. Then I'll think, oh shit, I have to have, security for this. Then I'll think, okay, what security should I have? Probably I'll put something else over there. Or I'll do something else over here. Oh, this is not good enough. It still can be hacked. I'll do some. So can't we today think of satellites when they are launched itself at the stage? Can't we not embed all this? So with these questions and the question of accountability as to who's really responsible for ensuring that our satellites are safe in space, with these two questions, I want to ask a couple of questions from the audience, and then I'll request our chairman to. Yeah.
I'm Commander Abhay Singh from Defense Space Agency. So I was reading an article on SEMA attacks, that is cyber electromagnetic attacks. So what primarily I learned was that a satellite could be a rogue element which could transmit a malicious code into all the open terminals which use VSAT, or even as simple as a Wi-Fi router installed in your home and exploitation of 802.11a protocol. So although we are thinking ground above, but why not from space to below, that all your networks which have the open-ended on a Wi-Fi or a VSAT terminal or some kind of wireless transmission based on RF can also be exploited from space in a more massive manner because of the spread and the injection of a malicious code to get your entire network down.
Thank you, Commander. Top-down approach. One more question was there? Yeah. You can take the mic, please.
Thank you. I'm Pranab Satyanath from Council for Strategic and Defense Research. My question, Colonel Kuber, you had specifically mentioned that India is a little weak on implementing cyber laws. In that regard, space has several laws to protect against non-interference, to protect against jamming. For example, the ITU regulations have against spectrum jamming. So in this regard, and there are several other laws about proportionality from law of armed conflict that apply. So in this regard, how do the India's national security establishment look at the international treaties, and what are some of the measures they think about to respond to attacks or to assess attacks, and how this might be illegal based on international agreements? Thank you.
I think with these two questions and the few questions that I've asked, I'll leave it out there, and I thought we'll sum it up because we are coming to the end of the session. In fact, we've been kind enough that we got another 5 minutes to go. So all that I can tell you is international collaboration is an inescapable necessity. We should have friends. Cyberspace is for all. Anybody can go and put anything. It's a first come first served basis. Everybody is there, and everybody is coexisting in a particular environment at this point in time, and therefore I think there has to be a very internationally collaborative effort to do that. With that, I'll request the chairman, Mr. Rajiv, if you'd like to. So would you like to say something? Yeah, you can finish that.
I come to the point again that the space sector has recently opened up. One of the things is there is something called sectoral ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers that you have. So the space sector could come up with an ISAC of its own, where the industry, would share the best practices amongst themselves. So that is one that could immediately happen. And the other is, it's that when there was only ISRO and they were doing it, they have the internal process for ensuring security. But when we have multiple players coming in, that's a challenge that is there. ISRO has got CISO. But I wouldn't say that how many of the private sector space enterprises have a CISOs. So that is one another aspect that I think you should look at, having a security establishment within yourself. And the point that you were raising about secure by design is, security is also a functional requirement. That is one thing. If you realize that security is also a functional requirement, and the drawing board when you come for the first meeting, and as you list out all the functional requirements of the spacecraft or whatever it is, you list out that security is also one of them. That's when you will have secure by design. You don't retrofit afterwards. So that is one part, and from practical experience, we have seen that when we don't put security as a functional requirement, the design that comes out is different. When you put security as a functional requirement, the design, the architecture itself changes altogether. So that itself will ensure that security is inbuilt right at the beginning. The another point is that, from our office, we are in the process of trying, having this sectoral PPP model of consultations for the cybersecurity aspect. So we will shortly call for a meeting with the space sector also for the cybersecurity consultation. So a public-private partnership, consultation process we'll also have with the space sector. With these words, I would like to thank you.
So we talked about, is it on? Hello? Yeah, we talked about standards, information sharing, threats, and these are all very important aspects to be considered. So let me first clarify and assure that standards do exist. Standards exist, and past many years, the security is ingrained into the process, the entire process. Now, the problem is that the companies which are coming up, which have already come up, which are coming up, they expect affordable solutions. But it is easier said than done. Affordability and cybersecurity may not go together. So how do we work out affordable solutions meeting the standards? So a space agency, any space agency has to follow standards. They do follow standards, and they can do it. But whether small companies coming up, as Shri Narendra said, whether they have the security organization within that company. So these factors are the points which need to be discussed and worked out. What is more important is to come out with reference implementation. See, guidelines, standards is fine, but what a small company or an emerging company, a growing company needs is a reference implementation. How to do it? The implementation guides. Throwing standards at them may not help. It is difficult for them to do. They have to be there is some hand-holding required. Then that's where the government and industry cooperation is very important. And that's where the role of industry association, as Mr. Narendra said, that they will have consultations. So industries and government has to have a collaborative approach. There has to be pooling of resources to come out with ways and means of countering these threats. And sharing of intelligence, sharing of experiences. So as he said, analysis centers. You have to have information sharing and analysis centers. And moreover, over and above that, you need to share lessons learned, because always there are lessons learned over a period of time. So collaboration, sharing, lessons learned, joint efforts, resource pooling, creating a pool of resources which are expert at auditing or pen testing the space sector. They are not generic cybersecurity experts. They have been trained for space sector. Like many of this, including ISRO, has created a pool of resources within ISRO where pen testers are created, which focus, which have domain knowledge and are able to do it. So that kind of pool across industries has to be created. Awareness, training, retraining, and international cooperation. These are the points I would like to close with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for adhering to the time and moderating it, Colonel Kuber, according to that. The discussion was precise. Thank you for keeping it to that, but it was certainly pertinent. I'm sure we have a lot more to discuss, many questions, but these sessions are only ignitions, if I may say so, and you can take these discussions and questions off the stage. With that, can I please have a loud round of applause for all our speakers here and our chair, and for the audience as well for staying active throughout the session. So can I request all of you for a group picture, please? We'll be starting our next session right away. Maybe you could all. I'm sorry. I'm here. Where will I go there? It's okay. We'll be starting our next session right away. It'll be a quick 40-minute session before we break for tea and coffee.